Kathy Blair, born in California on May 31, 1961, was raised in a supportive family home with her parents, a brother, and a sister. From an early age, Kathy held a deep love for the arts, with music, especially singing, serving as her genuine passion. This inherent affection influenced her educational path. She moved to Austin to pursue vocal performance at the University of Texas. Following graduation, Kathy began a rewarding profession as both a music teacher and an instructor for a Christian choir. She devoted herself to her job, and her students, drawn in by her contagious enthusiasm, loved her. Kathy was married twice over the years, with both marriages ending in divorce. She brought up her 2 children, a son and a daughter, on her own. At 52 years old, in 2013, Kathy achieved a lifelong aspiration by relocating to a new residence in an Austin suburb that appeared quiet and secure. It served as her ideal haven, a location where her adult children, including her son serving in the military, could come to visit. On the 5th of December, 2014, her 3-year-old son, Joe, arrived to stay with her for several weeks before his upcoming deployment. The next day, the 6th of December, Joe came home around noon, having spent the night before with friends. He called for his mother, but was met only with silence. A disturbing sensation prompted him to inspect the rooms individually, until he arrived at Kathy's bedroom. The sight he found there was one of unimaginable horror. Kathy was lying still on the floor beside her bed, encircled by a pool of blood. Joe instantly realized she was deceased and, in a state of panic, rushed outside to contact the police. When investigators arrived, they quickly confirmed Kathy had been dead for numerous hours. The large quantity of blood at the location left no question. This was not an accident. It was a ruthless murder. While medical examiners started their somber work, police officers carefully processed the crime scene. Among the initial observations was the condition of a sizable jewelry box in her bedroom. Its drawers were open and scattered across the floor, and it was clear that some of Kathy's jewelry was gone. This promptly caused detectives to view robbery as the main motive. Nevertheless, this hypothesis soon faced contradictions. Oddly, no other items of considerable worth had been removed. Kathy's laptop, phone, and other costly belongings remained undisturbed, plainly visible. The house was not pillaged, indicating the intruder had only searched for jewelry. The timing also brought up queries. Nighttime break-ins were less frequent than daytime burglaries, and this specific neighborhood was known for its safety, where such offenses were almost unprecedented. The order of occurrences further complicated the mystery. Blood marks on the jewelry box, drawers, and other bedroom areas suggested the assault happened prior to the search for valuables. This implied the intruder assaulted Kathy as soon as they entered her bedroom. Moreover, no evidence of forced entry was found at the front door. Although the back door was unlocked, Joe verified that this was a routine habit of his mother's. These specifics made detectives wonder, was this genuinely a robbery or simply a disguise for a planned murder? If it was the latter, it presented a more frightening line of questioning. Did the killer know Kathy? And were they aware of the unlocked back door? Even with their thorough efforts, forensic specialists found it difficult to uncover any conclusive evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, and nothing solid to identify the culprit were found. The sole concrete piece of evidence recovered was a partial shoe print left in Kathy's blood within her bedroom. Medical examiners concluded Kathy died from numerous stab wounds and also exhibited signs of strangulation. Significantly, no evidence of sexual assault existed, further strengthening the detectives' belief that this was not a random act, but something much more personal. Lacking physical evidence to direct them, police shifted their attention to Kathy's close acquaintances, looking for anyone who might have held a motive. Understandably, their initial scrutiny centered on her son Joe due to his being in the house. Nonetheless, after confirming his alibi, he had spent the whole night with friends and his location was verified, detectives promptly eliminated him as a suspect. Subsequently, they interviewed Kathy's friends and colleagues, hoping to reveal any disagreements or resentments. However, everyone they spoke to described a consistent image. Kathy was liked by all, never involved in arguments, and devoted most of her time to her choir. Just as they appeared to reach an impasse, an important clue surfaced. Several of Kathy's close friends separately brought up her second ex-husband, a man she had divorced 4 years earlier. Based on Kathy's account, their separation was far from friendly. He had reportedly been relentless, unwilling to move on, and at one point, Kathy had even voiced fears for her safety, requesting friends to keep her new address from him. Detectives located the man, finding that he resided close to Austin. His immediate response during their questioning raised considerable alarms. The instant Kathy's death was brought up, his initial reaction was she shot? This seemed extremely odd to investigators. Why would he presume a gunshot wound instead of a stabbing or another cause of death? Asked about his location that night, he asserted he had been on a brief trip in his RV, even agreeing to a search without a warrant. Despite their suspicions, they discovered no weapons, no blood, and nothing connecting him to the crime. He stayed on their watch list, but without firm evidence, they were forced to continue their investigation. Several days later, an unanticipated call came from a friend of Kathy's, Hundred. She described an odd occurrence at a memorial service held in Kathy's remembrance. During the event, an unfamiliar man rose to deliver a speech. From his opening words, his conduct, voice, and gestures made attendees uncomfortable. Most bizarrely, none of Kathy's closest friends recognized him. As he spoke, it became evident he had not genuinely known Kathy. His words appeared made up. Intrigued, detectives made inquiries, and eventually, a friend recognized him as a sales associate from a nearby women's clothing store. Police located him. The man confessed he had never met Kathy, stating he had read about her murder, felt sorrow, and chose to attend the memorial. Though his explanation was unusual, no evidence connected him to the crime, so detectives had to proceed. For several disheartening days, the case made no progress. Then, a crucial development took place. A man named Rob Leaf contacted the police, asserting he had essential information. He clarified that he had recently obtained a new thermal imaging scope for his hunting rifle. Motivated to test it, he went for a walk in the early morning of the 6th of December, near a wooded section at the border of his neighborhood. While he walked, a car slowly drove past him before stopping. Moments later, a man got out of the car and proceeded down a nearby street, disappearing into the night. At that moment, Rob gave it little thought. However, upon seeing news of Kathy's murder, something became clear. The man he had seen had been walking towards her house. Remembering his thermal camera had been recording, he reviewed the video. It was there, the man plainly visible walking away from his vehicle. Detectives were interested but encountered a major difficulty. Thermal imaging only showed a silhouette, making identification almost unfeasible based solely on looks. Nonetheless, the video provided useful hints. The man seemed tall, broad-shouldered, and possessed a distinctive stride. Crucially, the camera had also recorded his car, which investigators hoped would assist in narrowing down a list of potential vehicle models from the recording. They compared the man's stature and physique to their earlier suspects, Kathy's ex-husband, and the peculiar man from the memorial, but neither corresponded to the silhouette or the car in the footage. This strengthened their skepticism about both men's participation, essentially returning them to their starting point. Despite additional analysis of the footage and an ongoing search for new suspects, no significant leads appeared, and the case again reached a discouraging stalemate. Then, on the 15th of December, everything took a different turn. Police got a desperate call from a caretaker who had gone to check on an elderly pair, Sydney and Billy Shelton. As she neared their home, she instantly observed something wrong. The front door was open wide, with clear indications of forced entry near the lock. Inside, she found the couple lying still in a pool of blood in their bedroom. Medical examiners later verified both victims had sustained numerous stab wounds, similar to Kathy Blair. Detectives noted a disturbing similarity. The Sheltons' jewelry box drawers were pulled out and strewn about, with all jewelry gone. However, as with Kathy's situation, nothing else of worth had been removed. The remarkable resemblances between the two crimes were undeniable, causing investigators to strongly believe the same offender was responsible. The victims resided merely 15 minutes from each other. Both assaults took place at night while the victims were asleep, and in both cases, the killer emptied jewelry boxes but left other valuable items undisturbed. At first, investigators had thought Kathy's murder was personal, carried out by an acquaintance. Now, they had to reassess everything. What if this wasn't about retaliation or a personal animosity? What if the murderer was selecting victims arbitrarily? Detectives urgently searched for any link between Kathy and the Sheltons, shared friends, places they might have frequented, but discovered nothing. Their lives had never crossed paths. This resulted in a chilling awareness. They were probably dealing with a serial killer. This was no longer solely about solving a murder. It was a race against time before he attacked once more. Police started re-interviewing all individuals linked to the victims, imploring them to share even the most minor, seemingly unimportant detail. This perseverance ultimately yielded results. A friend of Kathy's remembered a discussion from several months prior to the murder. Kathy had spoken about a troubling interaction with a handyman, Timothy Parlin, hired by her landlord. She had characterized his work as subpar, but more disturbingly, his conduct had made her uneasy. Detectives reached out to Kathy's landlord, who provided Timothy Parlin's contact details. The initial finding was that Timothy's brother worked at the church the Sheltons regularly attended, and Timothy himself had been observed there. Subsequently, a more thorough investigation into his past uncovered an extensive criminal record. Numerous arrests for theft, nearly always involving jewelry. During the investigation, Timothy was on parole and staying in a long-term hotel. Parlin was visited by detectives. He agreed to answer questions but would not permit them into his room, insisting they speak outdoors in the hotel parking area. At first, Timothy asserted he didn't recall Kathy, but after hearing further details, he suddenly remembered performing repairs at her home. He strongly denied any role in her murder, stating he had an alibi. He was on the night shift at a convenience store when Kathy was slain. As they conversed, detectives observed that Timothy did not match the silhouette from the thermal camera footage. He was considerably shorter, and his car did not look like the one seen that evening. Lacking concrete evidence, they departed without success. Nevertheless, an unforeseen development occurred. When they telephoned Timothy's employer to confirm his alibi, they discovered he had been terminated a week before Kathy's murder, making his alibi untrue. Detectives immediately hurried back to the hotel, but Timothy had left. His wife opened the door and agreed to a search of their room. That's when they got a crucial lead: a pawn shop receipt indicating Timothy had sold several pieces of jewelry, dated the very day Kathy was murdered. Detectives proceeded directly to the pawn shop, confirming the jewelry was Kathy's on 6. Even more importantly, the shop's security cameras had recorded footage of the parking lot. Timothy had not arrived in his personal car. He was in his sister's vehicle, which police promptly identified by its license plates. This was a vital detail because the car appeared nearly identical to the one caught on the thermal camera on the night Kathy Blair was murdered. This supplied enough reason for a warrant to search the vehicle. As forensic specialists inspected the car, they found traces of blood on the front seat and floor. Lab results verified it. It was Kathy Blair's blood. Immediately, Timothy Parlin was taken into custody for interrogation. Even when faced with the undeniable evidence, he obstinately reiterated, "These hands have never killed anyone." Timothy was questioned by detectives for hours. Eventually, he broke, but not as they expected. He persisted in denying the murders but now asserted he knew the perpetrator, a man named Sean. Understandably, investigators were doubtful. The evidence against Timothy was compelling, and this appeared to be a desperate effort to divert responsibility. Nonetheless, they chose to investigate Sean. What they uncovered did not immediately suggest murderer. Sean Gant Benalcazar, 30, was a former science educator with a microbiology degree and no criminal history. He resided hundreds of miles from Austin, making his participation appear highly improbable. Nevertheless, detectives journeyed to his town to interrogate him. Sean confessed to meeting Timothy a few months earlier and considering him suspicious. But moments later, he made an unusual disclosure. He had been in Austin on the nights of both murders and had lodged at Timothy's residence during that period. The situation became increasingly perplexing. At first, Sean stated Timothy had departed the house without saying anything on the night of Kathy's murder. But minutes later, he altered his account, confessing they had gone to Kathy's house together. According to Sean, Timothy exited the car and came back minutes later with a bag stained with blood. Sean looked inside, saw jewelry, and understood Timothy had committed a terrible act. But he maintained he had no foreknowledge of what would occur and had not intended to be involved in any crime. As detectives proceeded with questioning, Sean requested to use the restroom. An investigator observed him walk off, and it became clear his stride, stance, and movements strikingly resembled the silhouette captured by the thermal camera footage on the night Kathy was killed. This presented a grave question, causing detectives to strongly believe Sean was the real murderer. However, without an admission, they had nothing concrete. Timothy, at least, had physical evidence connecting him to the crime. With Sean, they had nothing at all. After he returned from the restroom, they questioned him, disputing his account of events. They hinted they didn't think he had remained in the car, suggesting Timothy might have compelled him into Kathy's house. It was a calculated risk, and it succeeded. Sean paused, then ultimately confessed he had entered the house alone. He stated he entered through the unlocked back door, seeking valuables. Upon arriving at Kathy's bedroom, he observed the jewelry box and Kathy sleeping in her bed. Initially, Sean adhered to his altered narrative. He asserted he had carefully removed the valuables and left without harming Kathy, even proposing Timothy might have come back to the house later and committed the murder. However, detectives knew this conflicted with the blood evidence on the jewelry box, which showed the killer had taken valuables after the murder. They kept questioning him, disproving his falsehoods bit by bit. Finally, he confessed. Sean acknowledged he had killed Kathy. As he told it, as soon as he entered her bedroom, she woke up and attacked him. In a panic, he drew a knife and stabbed her repeatedly. After she was dead, he took the jewelry, hurried out, and went back to the car. Detectives still held reservations about the detail of Kathy lunging, finding it difficult to believe she would suddenly assault him. But regardless, his confession was sufficient for an arrest. To bolster their case, they took his shoes, and forensic specialists confirmed a precise match between the soles and the bloody footprint discovered in Kathy's bedroom. Nevertheless, one significant issue persisted: the murder of the elderly couple. When asked about it, Sean's behavior instantly shifted. He requested an attorney and declined to speak further. Lacking direct evidence connecting him to the Shelton murders, investigators reached an impasse regarding that case. Therefore, they reverted their attention to Timothy. Timothy Parlin was taken into custody as an accomplice in Kathy's murder. According to Texas law, this meant he faced the identical charges as Sean, even if he hadn't physically taken part in the killing. Timothy confessed to driving Sean to Kathy's house but maintained he never exited the car and had no knowledge his partner would murder her. He did admit to selling Kathy's stolen jewelry, directly linking him to the crime. When questioned about the Shelton's murders, he admitted he and Sean had also gone there to rob the house, once more asserting he remained in the car while Sean entered. Investigators pondered the possibility that Timothy was being truthful. The thermal camera footage of Kathy's murder clearly displayed only one person getting out of the vehicle. If the pattern continued, Sean probably acted alone again. Ultimately, Timothy Parlin was charged in all 3 murders due to his role as an accomplice, even without personally committing the killings. Sean Gomp Benalcazar was formally charged with Kathy's murder, but investigators could not yet conclusively prove his involvement in the Shelton case. The court decided that Timothy and Sean would have separate trials. During his trial, Timothy asserted his innocence in the physical killings, contending he had no knowledge his accomplice would murder anyone. Nevertheless, the undeniable facts that he drove Sean to both crime scenes and benefited from selling Kathy's stolen jewelry were overwhelming. The jury found him guilty, condemning him to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. Sean's trial was significantly more intricate. Unlike Timothy, who was directly connected by physical evidence, the case against Sean primarily relied on his confession, the shoe print, and the thermal camera footage. His lawyer vigorously contended that detectives had forced Sean to confess and pressured him into accepting responsibility. He also maintained that the remaining evidence was entirely circumstantial. Consequently, the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict, obliging the judge to declare a mistrial. However, prosecutors were resolute. Several months later, Sean was again in court for a second trial. On this occasion, the prosecution successfully persuaded the jury of Sean's guilt. He received a life sentence in prison without parole for Kathy's murder. Despite strong suspicions, he was never formally charged in the murder of the elderly couple. Investigators were confident he was accountable, but lacked the firm evidence to ensure the charges held. In the end, both men faced consequences, but some aspects of the case were left unresolved. Detectives could never conclusively ascertain why Sean had murdered his victims. Had Kathy genuinely woken up, he could have simply escaped. It was dark, and she would not have been able to recognize him. The only plausible deduction about Timothy's motive for targeting Kathy in the robbery was a probable resentment. Her grievance to her landlord about his substandard repairs months before had probably affected his earnings, potentially cultivating animosity. Whether that animosity directly contributed to the terrible escalation that night remains a matter of conjecture. What was evident, however, was that what started as a simple break-in had regrettably resulted in a brutal murder. Regarding the elderly Sheltons, detectives possessed no firm theories about the reason for their murders. They entertained the idea that Timothy had encountered them at church, and some dispute, akin to Kathy's circumstances, had caused resentment, but this was purely hypothetical. Concerning Sean, investigators could not exclude the possibility that he had no motive whatsoever, that he merely desired to kill. If that were true, there was every reason to believe he would have kept on murdering had he not been caught. One last vital detail about Sean's second trial emphasizes the importance of the thermal camera footage. That solitary piece of evidence turned out to be the crucial element in obtaining his conviction. If Rob Leaf had not opted to test his new thermal scope in the middle of the night, and if he had not accidentally captured the exact moment Sean exited his car, the case against him might have entirely collapsed, and Sean Gunt Benalcazar could have gone free.